I am Marc Doty for Buchla, and we are here at Superbooth. We don't really have anything new to announce as of yet. I mean, there are a number of things that we're sort of working through. We want to make sure to do it right. But we did want to make an appearance at Superbooth. It's a great convention for synthesizers. It's the place we need to be. So we brought this 24-panel system, and we've been having a great time with it, and people have been having a great time with it. There's been a lot of the typical response where people kind of come up and have that like awestruck look that I had not that long ago as well. But it's really interesting. People are really curious about what it is. What's this about that's different from all of the other systems? And it's weird because a lot of people are not necessarily familiar with Buchla. So I have to say things like, well, it's a modular company that basically had its start in 1963, and people are like, and I'm like, you should know that if you're at a synthesizer convention. But it's been really fun trying to characterize the Buchla experience to a typical modular or Eurorack experience. And I know there's a huge amount of overlap, but this is like the far end of that sort of conceptual synthesizer interaction. And it's really interesting. I often describe it more as like a compositional style or a frame of reference, because it's not so simple as a linear process. And it's not so much about like, I desire this particular outcome, but more about exploration and, you know, even surprise as far as the architecture is concerned, and diving into the modules. And I think that's how Don wanted it. The concept, like, these are compositional tools within the overarching compositional style that is electronic music. And so talking about how once you get into it, it's like an infinite, huge realm of possibility. And I'm a person who has dealt with a few synthesizers over time and a number of interfaces, but this is an entirely different experience for me, which it surprises me when I tell people, it surprises them, but I'm serious. Like, once you start to understand the intention and get past some of the, you know, challenges, maybe the terminology, etc., once you're in there, I can understand why so many Buchla users are Buchla users for life. You know, a lot of the people who embrace Buchla stay with Buchla, and it's their voice, their expression. It makes perfect sense because there's just such an infinite realm of possibility and exploration that exists in the system. So basically what this system is, and it's really cool, it is Joel DeVel's system mirrored. Joel came with us to do a presentation for Superbooth and demonstrate some of the functionality of the modular systems and the easel. And to do that, he wanted to bring his system, but we were going to bring a system, so we basically set this system up like Joel's system using the same modules. And because he could just bring his presets on a card and pop them in there, this system works as his system does, which is one of the unique aspects of a Buchla system. You can't really do that with anything else. Just populate it with the same modules, pop a card in it, and pow, it's someone else's synthesizer. So this system is set up, like I said, for Joel's system. But one of the things that people typically come up and ask about, and it's kind of the center of what we're doing here, is the 252E Polyphonic Rhythm Generator module. It's obviously very striking. People, it's the first thing people see across the room. And it is a remarkably unique system of sequencing. And there really aren't the words to describe it, but I'll try to use some words to describe it. Okay, basically, all of these concentric rings are tracks with different step counts. Like the furthest ring out on the outside is 16 steps. And then it goes to 12 steps and decreases down to 3 steps. So you have a whole bunch of different tracks of different step counts. These tracks are made up of cells, these individual squares, and each of those cells can output 3 different pulse outputs and contain 6 different voltage numbers that you can set. So basically you can set 6 different voltage outputs and 3 different pulse outputs per step on these rings. Okay, then there are 3 clocks, and you can apply these 3 clocks to any ring you want, which will cause that ring to play like a sequencer, basically moving through its step count. Now, because the different rings have different step counts, they line up in different ways. You can make them so they all line up, for example, so they all meet at 1, which means the ones in the center go slower and the ones on the outside have to speed to get to 1, so they all line up at the same time, which creates a different sequence output, as you can plainly tell. This other setting on cycle allows them all to move at the same speed, but they are not lining up at 1, which means you'll get all kinds of different interactions that you wouldn't have typically gotten, which allows you to have music that changes over time and is not static. It's not just a sequencer repeating notes or whatever. And there's also a third setting, which is a free setting where each clock gets to run on its own speed freely. So then it's just a magic free-for-all. The cool thing about that is then if you introduce a fluctuating voltage into the clock and a source of pulses, then the fluctuating voltage will move through the various rings, and the pulse will cause the clock to be applied to the ring that it's on when the pulse happens. And with judiciousness, you can force it, you can make decisions about what rings you want it to go to. So then your sequence is no longer limited just to one particular ring with, one particular step count. You can have it moving between a multitude of rings and encountering the pulses and CV voltages in those rings. And it's kind of hard to conceptualize because it's so complex, but that's basically the outcome. So what we have here, they don't seem to be moving a huge amount, but it's basically like a record player where you drop a needle on one, concentric ring on the record player or one part of the spiral, and then move it to another using the instruments that you're currently using. And the outcome is, well, this thing's been playing the whole time in the background. You're probably all pretty sick of it. Yeah. But yeah, it creates really great outcomes just on its own. But then when you start adding other, movements to the oscillators and filters and etc., it's just a realm of infinite possibility. Well, I really regret my exposure to Buchla instruments for one main reason, and that is the deeper I got into it, because I test all the modules, I have to understand them and I have to see what they're doing. So I've had to, immerse myself in it. And I found my tests stop being tests and become creative exploration every single time, to the point where I know what needs to be tested, what functions and what jacks. And then from that point on, it's a little composition session. And there are times where I can get totally lost in a single module because what I'm hearing is so interesting and beautiful. And I've gotten to the point where I have to whip out my phone and record things. I'm recording a huge amount of what is just my day-to-day testing because I love how it sounds. I love what it does. It's really an inspiring and unique architecture for a person like me who was used to, more traditional or, Moog format or typical synthesizer format. So it's become a thing. The reason why I regret it is now I gotta have it. And so yeah, I'm gonna have to start saving.
Good luck with that. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Well, thank you.